the economy needs to grow at a faster pace so that more revenue can be made available for capital expenditure rather than the majority of the budget going towards debt servicing. However, a few questions need to be answered. Is this budget the best one the government can put forward considering its limitations? Is the government doing enough to grow the economy? And despite the IMF program, is the government underspending? Also, do we expect Dr. Phillips and the People's National Party government to keep within these constraints? To give us some analysis on these matters, we're joined online by financial analyst, Ralston Hyman, and the deputy spokesperson on finance, Fayval Williams. Welcome to Talk Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
All right, Ralston, let me start with you. It's the first time that both the estimates of expenditure and the revenue measures were tabled at the same time before the beginning of the 2015-16 year. Is this a major achievement for the government, or is it neither here nor there?
Well, it's a major achievement for the country, not the government, in that provides for a greater level of transparency and accountability as well as predictability. These things are important to the boosting of investor confidence. Investor confidence is important to the mobilization of investments, and investments are important to the acceleration of economic growth. So it's not something for the government, it's something for Jamaica.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with Ralston. It reduces uncertainty in the economy among investors, as you said. You don't have to guess and spell anymore. I mean, if you recall, you get the expenditures first, and then you kind of had to try to figure out what the revenues would be and what the tax package would look like, and it created a lot of uncertainty in those in the months leading up to it, and until we hear the figures. So it's a good thing for the country. I'd agree.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Williams, you mentioned that you believe it's important, but do you think that Dr. Phillips will be able to stick within these confines going into an election cycle?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I just had some other sounds coming in at the same time.
Sure. I was asking you, given the fact that the country is about to enter into an election cycle, do you expect the government to be able to keep within these confines?
Well, it's not that I'm, expecting it. They've committed to it and have to. If not, we all know what the consequences are. Pretty much the bottom would fall out of the economy if they don't. You have a lot in terms of confidence riding on this IMF agreement. And so, yes, they have to stick with it. They just have to. I don't think there's any choice. What we would like to see is, in addition to the IMF program, that there's a real focus on growing the economy, because that's the only way you're going to get the tax revenues that are projected. You're going to get serious dent in unemployment. You're going to get the kind of public services that we require as residents of this country. So it's not, we're saying it's not just the IMF program that this country needs. It needs a growth program on top of that to get this economy going the way it needs to go.
But one thing that we're pursuing in the current model is that the private sector is supposed to be the engine of economic growth. So the government lays the foundation and facilitates economic growth, and the private sector is the actor in economic growth. What we have been seeing is that the private sector is not as responsive as they should have been. And many people in Jamaica, it's a favorite pastime to talk about politicians and political leadership. Most of the time we tend to forget about private sector leadership. And historically what we've seen is that the private sector has not demonstrated the leadership that is necessary to drive economic growth. When we look at some of the numbers, the productivity center tells us that what we call in economic terms capital intensity, or that's the level of machinery per man of the labor force, has been declining consistently for the last 14 years. The private sector is not investing in R&D. The private sector is not investing enough in retooling. The private sector is not investing enough in training its workers. As a result of that, they have not been able to take advantage of the foundations for economic growth laid by the government. It is not the government that is going to grow the economy. The government is going to lay the foundation to facilitate economic growth. And they have been doing a lot in that regard. What we're seeing is that the private sector is not as responsive as they should be. And we need to talk to the private sector about this thing. Look at the revenue flows. When we look at the revenue flows, of the 10 billion outstanding in tax revenues, 6.6 billion represents corporate taxes. That is taxes from the private sector. When we look at the PAYE as at the end of December was running 2 billion above budget. These are the people that are subjected to wage freezes, high levels of unemployment, rising prices, yet their tax take was running ahead, while the private sector, which is making more profits than ever, their tax take is constantly below budget. So what we're seeing is that we need to focus more on the private sector. Although they are making more money, they are not investing enough in R&D, training, social development. You can't compete internationally or in the domestic market in a knowledge-based economy if you do not invest in capital intensity and the training of your workers and R&D. Just as simple as that.
Well, you know, the private sector in any country could always do more. Our economy, at this point in time, I think we need to look outside of Jamaica for markets. Or we've seen over the years, certainly in the last 2 or 3 years, our exports have not done well because of the currency devaluation. It was expected that exports would be a bright spot when you devalue your currency or depreciate your currency, but that hasn't turned out to be the case. In fact, what the currency does, it increases the uncertainty that businesses have, increases their inability to plan because they don't know what level of depreciation that they can expect, next year, the following year. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy, and I don't know that any business person is going to rush out and make big investments when you are faced with a mountain of uncertainty in this economy.
Ralston, uncertainty in the Jamaican economy, and that's one of the reasons why private sector may be afraid to invest. How do you respond to that?
Well, if you look at take a 50-year look at the Jamaican economy. Every time there has been accelerated growth in the Jamaican economy, it's always about foreign direct investments. It's not about local investment because our private sector players are basically margin gatherers. They do not believe in innovation and raising productivity levels and those things. So we see a lot of firms, international firms, still investing despite the talk of this uncertainty. Because the same private sector leaders in the confidence survey, they tell us that they have more confidence in 2014 than they had 3 years ago. So we can reconcile that they have more confidence and it's not translating in more investment. Yet we are seeing foreign direct investments moving from 218 million in 2012 to 568 million in 2013. So what is it that the foreigners are seeing that the local investors are not seeing? And why is this? Historically, it has been like that. From bauxite to alumina in the 1960s to tourism to garment manufacture in the 1980s to the Spanish invasion in the 1990s. That's what we have been seeing. All the local investors do is bellyache and so the government must do this. Every time the government do this, they say, okay, move the goalpost, we want you to do that too. And we want you to do that too. And then they are not very responsive.
Okay, but can I say something to that in terms of the FDI, foreign direct investment in Jamaica? You suggest that foreigners have more confidence than the locals. But if you look at the industries into which those investments go, those industries are, one, U.S. dollar industries, and markets are abroad. Take bauxite. The market for that is abroad in U.S. dollars. Take tourism, even though the tourists come here, but that's the U.S. dollar sector, and you can go down the list and name the industries. Those are the industries into which foreigners are investing because, one, they know where the market is. It's outside of Jamaica. And two, it's in hard currency. So I don't think that's a good comparison to compare that to what's happening in the local market.
Ralston, a listener just sent a comment, and he's basically asking, how is it that private sector must take up the mantle when for example, Nestle drop 200 people, Scotia dropping staff, etc. A lot of the manufacturing individuals are moving outside of Jamaica because the energy bill is just so high. So how then can the private sector really take up the mantle? That's from
local private sector can also invest in energy too. That's also an opportunity. So energy costs are high. Local private sector players can also invest in the energy sector too. What we're seeing is that the energy sector investments are basically being carried out by foreigners again. So those are just excuses. You know, the fact of the matter is that when we look at what is being done on the public sector side in order to deal with the problems raised by the private sector, interest rates are now lower than they were previously. The fiscal deficit has been eliminated. Inflation is low.
Not true, Ralston. Not true. Don't say it's been eliminated. That's not true.
Last year we had a balanced budget. This year we're targeting a fiscal deficit of $4 billion or 0.3% of GDP.
No, based on the numbers the government put out, it's more than
right.
That.
Inflation for the fiscal year to date was only 4.1%. Point to point, it was 5.3%. The current account deficit is projected at 5.3%. The government spending G as a percentage of Y is now down to 37%. What is it more that the private sector want to see? Are they waiting for a perfect world before they invest? Real investors do not wait until there's a perfect world to invest. That is why you have people like Warren Buffett, Carl Icahn, and all of those people who are real investors. What is it more that they want to see? A perfect world?
Go ahead.
You and I know that business people, well, let's just say, we've not had a history of government consistently performing. We go through these lurches. We go through periods of high inflation. We go through periods of currency devaluation. We go through periods of, fiscal deficit. And those are the things that cause great uncertainty in the economy. I mean, the currency is causing so much angst and so much uncertainty. It's not funny. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to understand this from a business person's perspective as well.
So what is the private sector saying? We have been used to all these gyrations, and we are seeing some stability now. So we are going to wait and wait and wait and wait. So when is it that the investments are going to take place?
Mm-hmm. No, I'd argue that there is not a lot of stability now. The currency is a major destabilizing force on the economy. It is reducing the quality of life. I mean, the people go into the stores, they cannot buy things, their wages or the money in their pocket is not getting them the things that they bought last week. It is a major depression on what you can do in this economy.
How is it that the government, or how do you think the government is going to fund this budget?
Or it's going to fund the 2015-2016 budget?
Yes.
Well, it tells, the minister admits that there is a gap of $10.35 billion that will need to be made up for the 2015-2016 year, and that he will tell us what the new tax measures are in the March, budget debate. So there is more taxes on the way to the tune of $10.35 billion for this 2015-2016 budget year that we're in. That's what we can look forward to. I also think when I look at the budget, that it's quite unrealistic when you look at the tax revenues that are projected to happen. So that's for the upcoming fiscal year. And look at the growth rate in the tax revenues relative to the fiscal year we're in. You're talking about a 9%. The year we're in right now is growing at maybe 6.5%. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where this optimism comes from that you're going to expect to see that kind of growth rate some 40% faster than this year. So, when I look at the budget, those are some of my takeaways. Right. And, I don't know what the new tax measures are that they're coming with, but there will be new tax measures.
Ralston Fayval is saying that it's not a realistic budget. What are your views on that?
Well, my views are contrary to that. I believe that the administration and the minister has done the best that they can do. I believe that tax revenues, revenue and grants of 458 billion. That's 26.1% of GDP. Well, normally, if you go back 5-10 years, what you'd see is that tax revenues, revenue and grants normally come in at 26-27% of GDP. The minister is spending 27.1% of GDP, and he expects to collect 26.8% of GDP. The bulk of the addition to the budget, it's about debt service charges. I always say that we should not pay the debt.
All right. I'm glad you went there. Ralston. If you look at the debt service charges, right? If you look at 2013, 2014, the charges were, call it $110 billion, right?
Right.
This was coming on the heels of the debt exchange, and interest rates went down about some $10 billion, right? Because of the debt exchange. Take a look at this fiscal year we're in. The expectation is that interest expense is going to be $129 billion. Why? Mm-hmm. If there is so much stability and confidence, and the debt is going down, and debt is being paid down, why is the interest expense up so much? One, we know that the debt is not being paid down because the mountain of debt is increasing. Two, we know that there's been a negative impact on the mountain of debt from the currency because, almost about half of it is denominated in U.S. dollars. Mm-hmm. So the currency has had a major impact on the budget.
Yes, certainly.
So when you say certainly like that's okay, but that's not okay. That's $10 billion that we could have spent elsewhere.
So what do we do with the currency?
We believe in a stable currency. We believe in growing the economy so that you can have additional, foreign exchange coming into the country. We believe in a stable currency and will do everything to keep the currency stable, because that's when you get people investing, locals investing, when you get increased confidence and you don't have this sort of impact on the budget. You knew that when the Jamaica Labour Party handed over this government, the economy was growing. Some 1.7%. It was growing, and you have. Take a look at the global world.
We were coming from 10 consecutive quarters of economic decline. Our relationship with the multilateral agencies were significantly damaged. We had an overvalued currency.
No. So Ralston, tell me, where is this currency going now then, since it's been so significantly overvalued? Since you have this government, it's been devalued. Where is it going to go? Where is it going to go?
All right, let me hear Ralston respond now. Yes, Ralston, go ahead.
Significant adjustments have been made. What we have seen is that when we look at those numbers, we have seen the currency trading somewhere between 150 and 160. The current account deficit, because of low energy prices, is now projected at 2.3%. We expect to see some stability taking place at this particular point in time.
I get in the wrap signal, but I want to throw in one last question. Ralston, then Fayval. Wage negotiations, it's on the table, but we're hearing hints of another wage freeze. Is it a case that the government must continue with the wage freeze in order to maintain this IMF deal, or is it a case that we need to balance it and give something to the public sector workers and at the same time try to maintain the IMF deal?
Well, the latter. We want to have the best of both worlds. You can't look at the public sector workers after 5 years and say you can't get an increase. And certainly the public sector can't come to the administration and say, oh, we want to get back all we lost in the last 5 years. So we want some 10%, some 15%, some 20% increase. That is not in the cards. There will be nothing more than about 5% is so much. So we need the public sector workers to get that in their heads. We cannot afford any more than that.
Look, I didn't see anything in the budget. I'm still looking through, but I didn't really see anything. Obviously, I agree with Ralston. After so many years, we can't. The government can't, in good conscience, say there's nothing here. There has to be some provision for that. But at the same time, they have to balance. They have to balance the needs there, the commitments that they've made. But I'm still looking through the budget. I didn't see anything in there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, there's 165 billion and there's a contingency, and that is not going to allow more than a maximum of 5%. So we want the public sector workers to get that in their heads.